True, nervous, very, very dreadful nervous I have been and am. But why will you say that I am mad? The disease has sharpened my senses, not destroyed, not dulled them. Above all is the sense of hearing acute. I have heard all things in heaven and in the earth. I have heard many things in hell. How then am I mad? Hearken and observe how healthily, how calmly that I can tell you the whole of my story. It's impossible to say how first the idea entered my brain, but once conceived, it haunted me day and night. Object there was none, passion there was none. I loved the old man. He had never wronged me. He had never given me insult. For his gold I had no desire. I think it was his eye. Yes, it was this. He had an eye of a vulture, a pale blue eye, with a film over it. Whenever it fell upon me, my blood ran cold. And so, by degrees, very, very gradually, I made up my mind to take the life of the old man, and thus rid myself of that eye forever. Now, this is the point. You fancy me mad, but madmen, they know nothing. You should have seen me. You should have seen how wisely I proceeded, and with what caution, with what foresight, with what dissimulation I went to work. I was never kinder to the old man than during the whole week before I killed him. And every night, about midnight, I turned the latch of the door and I opened it. Oh, so gently. And then, when I had made the opening sufficient for my head, I put in a dark lantern, all closed that no light shone out, and then I thrust in my head. Oh, you would have laughed to see how cunningly I thrust it in. Oh, I moved it slowly, very, very slowly, so that I might not disturb the old man's sleep. It took me an hour to place my whole head within the opening, so far that I could see him as he lay upon his bed. Nah! Would a madman have been so wise as this? And then, with my head, when it was well in the room, I undid the lantern cautiously. Oh, so cautiously. Cautiously, for the hinges creaked. I undid it just so much that a single thin ray fell upon the vulture eye. And this I did for 7 long nights, every night at midnight. But I found the eye always closed, and so it was impossible to do my work, for it was not the old man that vexed me, but his evil eye. And every morning, when day broke, I went boldly into his chamber and spoke courageously to him, calling him by name and in a hearty tone and inquiring how he has passed the night. So, you see, it would have to be a very profound old man indeed to suspect that every night, just at 12, I looked in upon him while he slept. Upon the 8th night, I was more than usual cautious in opening the door. A watch's minute hand moves more quickly than did mine. Never before that night had I found extent of my own powers. I could scarcely contain my feelings of triumph to think that there I was, opening the door little by little, and not even a dream of he never even dreamed of my secret deeds or thoughts. I fairly chuckled at the idea. Perhaps he heard me, for he moved in the bed suddenly, as if startled. Now, you may think that I drew back, but no. His room was black as pitch, with a thick darkness, for the shutters were closed, fastened through fear of robbers. And so I knew that he could not see the opening of the door, and I kept pushing it on steadily. I had my head in, and was about to open the lantern, when my thumb slipped upon the fastening, and the old man sprung up the bed, crying out, "Who's there?" I kept quite still and said nothing. For a whole hour I did not move a muscle. And in the meantime, I did not hear him lie down. He was still sitting up in the bed, listening, just as I have done night after night, hearkening to the death watches in the wall. Presently I heard a groan, and I knew it was a groan of mortal terror. I knew that he had been lying awake ever since that slight noise. I knew what the old man felt, and I pitied him, although I chuckled at heart. When I had waited a long time, very patiently, without hearing him lie down, I resolved to open a little, a very, very little crevice in my lamp. So I opened it. Oh, you cannot imagine how stealthily, until at length a simple dim ray, like the thread of a spider, shot out from the crevice and fell full upon the vulture eye. It was open, wide open, and I grew furious as I gazed upon it. I saw it with perfect distinctness, all dull, and with a hideous veil over it that chilled the very marrow in my bones. But I could see nothing else of the old man's face or person, for I had directed the ray as if by instinct, precisely upon that damned spot. And have I not told you that what you mistake for madness is but over-acuteness of the senses? Now I say, there came into my ears a low, dull, quick sound, such as a watch makes when enveloped in cotton. I knew the sound too well. It was the beating of the old man's heart. It increased my fury, as the beating of a drum simulates the soldier into courage. But even yet, I refrained and kept still. I could scarcely breathe. I held the lantern motionless. I tried how steadily I could maintain the ray upon the eye. Meantime, the hellish tattoo of the heart increased. It grew quicker, louder and louder every instant. The old man's terror must be extreme. It grew louder, I say, it grew louder every moment. Do you mark me well? I have told you that I am nervous. So I am. But the beating continued to grow louder. I thought the heart must burst. And now a new anxiety seized me. The sound would be heard by a neighbour. The old man's hour had come, and with a loud yell I threw open the lantern and I leapt into the room. He shrieked once only, and in an instant I dragged him to the floor and I pulled the heavy bed over him. And then I smiled gaily to find the deed so far done. But for many minutes the heart beat on with a muffled sound. This, however, did not vex me. It would not be heard through the wall, and at length it ceased. The old man was dead. I removed the bed to examine the corpse. Yes, he was stoned. Stone dead. I placed my hand upon his heart and held it there for many minutes. But there was no pulsation. He was stone dead. His eye would trouble me no more. Now, if you think still that I am mad, you will think no longer. When I describe the wise precautions I took for the concealment of the body. The night waned, and I worked hastily, but in silence. First of all, I dismembered the body. I cut off the head, and the arms, and the legs. I then took up 3 planks from the flooring of the chamber and deposited all between the scantings. I then replaced the board so cleverly, so cunningly, that no human eye, not even his, could detect anything wrong. There was nothing to wash, no stain of any kind, no blood splatter. I'd been too wary for that, and a tub had caught it all. When I had made the end of these labours, it was 4 o'clock, still dark as midnight, and as the bell sounded an hour, there came a knocking at the street door. I went to open it with a light heart, for what had I now to fear? There entered 3 men, who introduced themselves as officers of the police. Oh, a shriek had been heard by a neighbour during the night. Suspicions of foul play had been aroused. Information had been lodged at the police office, and they, the officers, had been deputed to search the premises. I smiled. For what had I to fear? I bade the gentleman welcome. The shriek, I said, had been my own in a dream. The old man, I mentioned, was absent in the country. I took my visitors all over the house. I bade them search well. I led them at length to his chamber. I showed them his treasures, secure and undisturbed. And in the enthusiasm of my confidence, I brought chairs into the room and desired them to rest from their fatigues, while I myself, in wild audacity of my perfect triumph, placed a chair upon the very spot beneath which reposed the corpse of the victim, and sat. The officers were satisfied. My manner had convinced them. I was singularly at ease. They sat, and while I answered cheerily, they chatted on familiar things. But ere long, I found myself growing pale, and wished them gone. My head ached, and I fancied a ringing in my ears. But still they sat, and still chatted. The ringing became more distinct. It continued. It became more distinct. I talked more freely to get rid of the feelings, but it continued until at length I found the noise. The noise was not in my ears. No doubt I grew pale, but I talked more fluently and with heightened voice. Yet the sound increased. And what could I do? It was a low, dull, quick sound, much like a sound of a watch makes when enveloped in cotton. I grasped for breath. And yet the officers, they heard it not. I talked more quickly, more fervently, but the noise steadily increased. I arose and I argued about trifles in a high key and with a violent gesticulations, but the noise steadily increased. Why would they not be gone? I paced the floor to and fro with heavy strides, excited by the fury of my observations of the men, but the noise steadily increased. Oh, God! What can I do? I foamed. I raved. I swore. I swung the chair upon which I had been sitting, and I grated it upon the floor. But the noise arose to all and continually increased. It grew louder, 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 and still the men chatted pleasantly and they smiled. Was it possible that they heard not? Almighty God! No, they heard. They suspected. They knew. They were making a mockery of my agony, of my horror. This, I thought. This, I think. But anything was better than his agony. Anything was more tolerable than this derision. I could bear those hypocritical smiles no longer. I felt that I must scream or die. Now again. Hark, louder, 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 louder. Villains! I shrieked. Dissemble no more. I admit the deed. Tear up the blanks here. It is the beating of his hideous heart.